Viewer discretion is very strongly advised for this video. If you have no desire to hear and learn about what took place to these minor children, please turn this video off right now. I thank you for wanting to learn about this, but please click off right now and go about your day. You don't want to learn about this. I don't want this in my head, and I have to tell you exactly what took place in this case so you can understand somehow how Josh Duggar is involved in this case. Today we're going to take a look at one of the most prolific, violent, sexual predators against children who has ever been caught. Today we're taking a look at Peter Scully. Who is Peter Scully? Peter Scully is an Australian-born man. He was born and lived in the Melbourne, Australia area before moving on to other locations around the world. Peter Scully had sexually abused several little girls. And as far as the Interpol, the Homeland Security here in the United States, the FBI and the Department of Justice, along with the police department in Australia and the Philippines. As far as we know, there are at least, ladies and gentlemen, 12 little girls who have been sexually abused by this individual. The most graphic and the most disgusting content that this man ever produced was his video series on Daisy. Daisy, of all of the victims, the youngest of all of his victims, and he did the most horrific things to this little girl. Daisy was 18 months old, ladies and gentlemen, at the time that he started to sexually, physically, and mentally abuse this little girl. He would do the most horrific things to this little girl and videotape it over and over again. Some of the videos he made 2, 3 copies of and doing different acts to this little girl over and over again. And then would distribute these videos on the dark web. These videos went out to hundreds of people. Some people paid upwards of $10,000 to receive several of the videos on Daisy. He titled the very last one, The Destruction of Daisy. And ladies and gentlemen, this is the type of the dark part of the society and world out there that you don't ever want to come across. The destruction of Daisy, what showed him beating, sexually molesting, sodomizing this 18-month-old little girl. And in the end of the video, part 1 of the 2-part series, luckily, law enforcement was able to catch him before he ever made part 2. But in part 1, the ending of the video showed him tying this little girl up by her feet and hanging her upside down from the ceiling of where she was. After he had already done all of what he had done to her that day for that video. Part 2 was he was going to murder this little girl. And don't get me wrong, Peter Scully had murdered multiple victims in the past. One, he strangled her and videotaped it after abusing her and then buried her body underneath the home that he was living in. This is, again, the most prolific, sickest individual we have ever seen on the dark web who has been caught, prosecuted, and is currently serving time for what he did. As law enforcement agencies from around the world were working to arrest this man and find him, what he had done the last day that he was a free man was he downloaded every single video that he had, every still photograph, to the dark web. He gave it all away at the end for free. Here you go. To everybody out there who had been following his story and paying for his content, he downloaded it all to free because he wanted the world to know exactly what he had done and how he had been doing it all. And they, a lot of people out there, when I say they, would eventually gather up this data and hold it for themselves. And now they sell it on the dark web. How do they sell it on the dark web? They sell it using Bitcoin and other forms of cryptocurrency. This is by far, and according to Homeland Security, the FBI, and the Department of Justice here in America, again, I cannot stress this enough. This is the sickest content they have ever seen. They've never caught anyone ever in all of the years that they have been tracking and arresting and prosecuting child pornographers. They have never seen anyone go to this extreme that Peter Scully did. Peter Scully was eventually arrested and convicted in the Philippines, where he currently is still incarcerated. He was given a life sentence with no possibility of ever leaving prison. He is there to this day, as of the end of December of 2021. The part that needs to be noted about Peter Scully and his sentence, though, is the Filipino Supreme Court recently changed their outline on actual sentencing for anyone who is ever caught producing, and has anything to do with production of child pornography. They have now changed the sentencing guidelines from life imprisonment without the possibility of ever release to death. And it should be noted that when it comes to the Philippines and they say death, they mean death. The president of the Philippines has hired hitman squads to go around Philippines on motorcycle and actually kill people that they actually see using illegal drugs. That's how rampant the problem is, and his idea of how to create and curb the actual drug use and people who are wandering around like zombies high out of their minds. He's out there, and he is actually encouraging hitman squads on motorcycle, 2 people on a motorcycle at a time. They find people doing drugs, selling drugs, using drugs. They kill them on sight. When it comes to inmates like Peter Scully, who is currently still alive and in prison, any day now, any minute from now, someone could come into Peter Scully's cell and execute him right there. Because they have already proven time and time again that retroactively they will then take that sentence and place it upon that individual. There's no trial, there's no appeal, there is nothing when it comes to the death sentence in the country of the Philippines. A lot of people have asked me in previous videos, do the producers of child pornography get more time than those who actually consume, pay for, and download child pornography like Josh Duggar? When it comes to those who actually produce child pornography here in the United States, if convicted underneath a federal statute, meaning the federal government actually prosecutes them, the answer is yes. They get, on average, 10 to 15 more years in prison than somebody like the Josh Duggars of the world who actually buy it, consume it, download it in some form or another. 10 to 15 years. On the state level, when it comes to states actually prosecuting child pornographers, those who produce child pornography, they get, on average, about the same sentence as somebody who gets caught with child pornography. So the answer is yes and no. When it comes to around the world, when it comes to certain areas and locations around the world that are prolific for child pornography and for child sexual abuse, the answer is no. They don't get longer sentences because they never live long enough to be sentenced in the first place. Those who are in the Pacific Rim don't live long enough to actually be sentenced. And if they are, they're sentenced just so they will be there for show, to try to coerce people not to do what they do. In countries like the Philippines, Vietnam, Thailand, and Singapore, to be examples, these individuals may never make it out of their homes alive to be arrested. They always die in some kind of gun battle within their own homes when they are caught. In other areas around the world, and particularly, South America and in some other countries, they make it out of their homes alive, but they disappear. They never make it to trial. So do they get longer sentences? Their sentence is almost always death of some course in itself. When it comes to Thailand, the Philippines, and Singapore, and some other countries in the Asian Pacific Rim area, they see a humongous amount of tourism of Americans and Europeans who are going there just to sexually abuse and molest children and videotape it. The production of child pornography is extraordinary in these areas because of the poor nature of the country itself. People just don't have the money, and they're allowing themselves and their children to be abused for $1. The dollar rules king in these countries, and other people will kidnap children and use them to be sexually abused for tourists. Now, Peter Scully, the most prolific, by far, serial, when it comes to crimes against children, serial. I use that just like the term serial killer. Prolific and multiple. Again, 12 victims that we least know of at this point. Some of the girls in his videos are blindfolded or have gags and things over their faces, so we cannot tell if they are actually the same victim or if they are an additional victim. That's why they say 12 at the minimum. Now, let's get on to Josh Duggar. When it came to the case of Josh Duggar, during the actual bail hearing on Josh Duggar, to deny him bail to be released out into the public before he stood trial, Homeland Security had actually said that they found videos that matched those from Peter Scully on Josh Duggar's computer. Without actually knowing which videos he actually had on his computer, I did not comment on it. I only cover things on this channel that I can document. They could have said, yes, that he had videos that belonged to Peter Scully on his computer, and that one of them may have been Daisy or the destruction of Daisy, without knowing which actual file number and video number were talking about. Again, I did not talk about it. In the actual charging documents against Josh Duggar, they listed the youngest victim as being 3 years of age. This is documented in the actual charging documents, so that is where I stopped. Now, I have been able to confirm through Homeland Security and the actual court documents of his bail hearing that Josh Duggar, on his computer and of the day in question, when they laid out the minute-by-minute timeline of Josh Duggar downloaded and paid for the actual videos, Destruction of Daisy, where Peter Scully had sexually abused, sodomized, and beat and sexually raped a 18-month-old baby, then hung her up by her feet from the ceiling. This video was found on Josh Duggar's computer. How do we know that it was Josh Duggar? Please allow me the opportunity to lay you out the timeline. Again, in case just now you were thinking, you know what, it could have been accessed remotely and somebody else did this to Josh Duggar. He texted Anna that he was going to be working late at the car dealership. Then the very next thing that he did was access the dark web and did a search for actual child pornography. He came upon the actual video that he was looking for, clicked on it, communicated with the individual who had the file, Destruction of Daisy, Part 1. He then logged out of the dark web on the very same device, accessed his own computer banking records, purchased using money that he had, that it was his money and Anna's money, in a joint account. He used it to purchase cryptocurrency and then purchased that actual video. Because next thing that happened, not even 2 minutes later, he downloaded that actual file and video of the destruction of Daisy video. Then he downloaded additional still photographs of young girls being sexually abused in multiple different ways. Then, after downloading those still photos, he had downloaded not one, but 2 additional child pornography videos. After the last video file he downloaded, he accessed another account that had to do with just the records for the car dealership. Passwords and account information are not accessible or saved on the computer for his bank account, nor is the bank or the account for the actual car dealership. He then additionally downloaded additional child pornography and then texted Anna again that he was leaving the car dealership and headed home. How anybody can defend that Josh Duggar didn't do all of this is beyond me. The federal government laid it out in the case. From the first text, then the pornography viewing, and then the downloading and purchase of the video, all the way to the point when he was done altogether and texted Anna again that he was leaving to work. And he was the only one there on that computer. Everybody else had gone home for the night. This is the kind of individual that Josh Duggar is. And how anybody can sit back and say, you know what, poor Anna, she now has to raise all of these children by herself. These little children have lost their father. I cannot stress this enough for the last time. When it comes to people who consume child pornography and those who watch child pornography, 87% said if those who have been caught and convicted and have spoken with law enforcement afterwards as part of their actual therapy, 87% said if given the opportunity at any point before they were arrested, if they could have sex with a minor, they would. 87% said they would have done it. When it comes to people who actually watch child pornography and have actually physically abused other children in the past, their children, if they have not abused them at the age and the time before they actually are arrested, 91% would eventually go on to abuse sexually their own children. So, are Josh Duggar's children unfortunate that they lost their father before he abused them sexually? Or has he already done it? And we just don't know about it because the Duggars are going to hide it, the church is going to protect them and hide it, and everybody else is going to protect it and keep the children away from the authorities to ever investigate it. Ladies and gentlemen, I cannot stress this enough. When it comes to people like Josh Duggar, there are 4 different levels within the child pornography and those who actually consume child pornography. Number 4 is the worst of the worst. Josh Duggar is right in there with the worst of the worst. He is the sickest that we have caught recently. Because the other videos that he had are not little children who are just running around naked in a birthday party. These are other abuse videos. He wasn't just into child pornography. He was into child pornography and abuse. Sexual abuse of children. I cannot stress that enough. There are so many skeletons in the Duggar family. that I could spend a lifetime trying to go through each and every one of the people who are associated to Josh Duggar and his family, who have been arrested, convicted of child pornography or abuse of a child. And I'm not even going to get into all of those who have abused women over and over again, and the church and the community that they live in have protected them. Thank you very much for watching this today. Say a prayer for every single victim out there, because these are lifelong, damaging, severely damaging things that happen to a child. You don't just shake this off and put a Band-Aid on it and walk away. These things, if they survive them at all, will damage that child forever. You don't just shake this off. This isn't a boo-boo you can put a Band-Aid on.